Welcome back. My name is Kristina Voko. I'm the Executive Director of BIRN in Albania. And in this last session for today, we are discussing about digital rights and digital space around elections. Of course, this is a segment or a topic very close to my heart because in the last several years, in the last 3 cycles of elections, we have been very closely monitoring the digital communication as well as vulnerabilities and gaps in regulating the online spheres in different angles of the electoral process, starting from those having to deal with online and digital platforms and campaigning in the digital sphere to the role of third parties during election and possible influence from malign actors, as well as online spending, which still remain a challenge around the Western Balkans to regulate and to properly monitor, but also in the behaving of the, let's say, the new outlets that being those online or the online communication of political actors themselves, but also of the citizens in the digital sphere. So there is a lot to uncover today, and we have a great panel. Unfortunately, we'll not have a lot of time, so I have my mobile phone with me just to check the time and to be as strict as possible. I'm not very well known for that, but I will present the panelists and we'll start immediately with the discussion. I'll read them as they are listed in the program, but then we'll switch a little bit the places. And here today we have Kastriot Fetahaj, that is coach for in Kosovo cyber team. Rezarta Krasniqi, Executive Director at the organization in Kosovo, Democracy for Democracy. Norik Selimi, founder at Pikasa Analytics from North Macedonia. Blerta Hoxha, Program Manager for the Western Balkan and International IDEA. Blerta is joining online today from Brussels. And Mr. Nebojša Regoje, I hope, thank you, that is Head of Public Relations at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Bosnia and Herzegovina. As I said, I'll switch a little bit the places. First of all, to leave the floor, first of all, to Blerta. Blerta is originally from Albania, but for many years now, she works at International IDEA at the Brussels office, and they have been directly involved in different ways in election, in supporting electoral processes around the Western Balkans, being those through the support toward central electoral commissions, but also in supporting different initiatives of local civil society in monitoring elections, especially those the campaigns and the section happening in the digital sphere. Blerta, you have quite a difficult task because until now, both yesterday and today, we discussed several times about this rush of all the countries of Western Balkans, including also Turkey, into adopting all the EU acts and being as prepared as possible toward our accession process. And we know that many of those acts refer also or have different specific requirements toward securing a safe space for free and fair election. And in addition, the latest initiative of the on EU democracy shields also put a lot of emphasis as not only ensuring a safe information environment, but also in securing free and fair election. So what is your take from the I don't want to say Brussels perspective, but also from looking at the region as a whole, where we stand into this process, in the approximation process, and how it has or will impact the digital sphere in around elections. Blerta, the floor to you.
Good afternoon, Kristina. Good afternoon, colleagues. I will start with a sincere apology for not being able to be physically present in Prishtina today, but thanks so much for this opportunity to intervene online. I'll jump straight into the core of the topic, Kristina. You portrayed everything that has kept us busy very well, so no need to lose more time on broad introductions, but just to say that at International IDEA, where we look very closely at the intersection between digitalization and democracy and elections for enlargement globally, and in my case for enlargement countries, a lot of what has kept us busy is in trying to translate for electoral authorities of enlargement countries what the EU digital legislation that impacts elections contains, that pertains to their work and will affect them in the future, but also a lot of effort goes into trying to having them embrace this approximation with the right spirit of that is enshrined and underpins EU treaties and values and European values. Why? Because this all of this body of the EU digital acquis, from the GDPR to the Digital Services Act, Transparency of Political Advertising Act, Artificial Intelligence Act, European Media Freedom, all of this chunk of legislation is initially born primarily to regulate markets. So it's not so immediately obvious for authorities where the direct link and impact on electoral processes stands. And secondly, it's fairly new, with the exception of the GDPR. It's also a lot to digest even for EU member states, let alone for enlargement countries. So therefore, we really wanted through our research, which I can also share, the links to later on, and through the series of engagements that we have done between EU member states, electoral authorities, and civil society and experts, and those in the Balkans, we wanted to draw this link. What does this chunk of legislation say that affects elections and democratic processes? And we also went into looking and assessing 4 pilot countries, Albania, Moldova, North Macedonia, and Ukraine, into where they stand with approximation, and especially as it concerns the running of an election campaign, especially online, but of electoral processes. And we found a mixed picture of growing digital threats, a mixed picture of attempts to building resilience, as you say, to counter FIMI, to regulate, to counter disinformation. But most of all, what we see and what we found is that, and we will, by the way, continue this work as of next year, spreading to all enlargement countries. Well, first of all, it will not come as a surprise to the colleagues in the room, but the alignment to this fundamental acts of EU legislation is quite nascent. It's quite, with the exception of GDPR, pretty much approximation of all the other acts that I mentioned is yet to be achieved, is at very embryonic stages. So a lot has to be done and to be, in our view, to be prioritized. The second element that I want to highlight, and you touched upon this, is that how do we ensure that in speeding up the approximation, these countries ensure that these regulations are approximated, reflected in national legislation in ways that uphold fundamental rights. This is critical. It's critical that these are not understood just as merely Chapter 10, information, society, and media elements, but that these are understood as fundamentals of democracy items. If they affect elections, if they affect democratic processes, media freedom, they sit much higher in the agenda in our take. So it's important that when countries like my own or others in the region attempt to regulate third parties, online campaigning, disinformation, FIMI, that they do so following strictly the values and guarantees that the EU legislation offers to fundamental rights and freedoms. We are a lucky region, right? Because, we can, thanks to the accession process, can rely on, we have a path that is that of EU legislation, which is one that is a global standard setter in upholding these rights. So it's very important that we stick, that these countries stick to this line to avoid foreign agent laws or repressive actions and, other actions that do not help the EU accession process and strengthening of democratic resilience. On the contrary. And then what else do we see? What else we find? I mean, we find that there's a need for cybersecurity and interagency cooperation in the field of elections to be bolstered. We must move away from the logic that just the electoral authority, of course, they are the lead in managing elections, but a lot of other actors, including experts, civil society, and other government agencies can come into help to ensure the integrity of this sphere, with the right understanding, of course, of the need to preserve information integrity and independence of electoral authorities. And there also the issue of capacities, typically electoral management authorities traditionally lack enough expertise to deal with these new emerging threats in the digital sphere, and the other agencies usually lack typical government cyber agencies, they lack expertise on elections. And here in the region, we have found where the role of actors such as yourselves, BIRN across the region, or other watchdogs can help with methodologies, with practical monitoring, where it makes sense to join forces for better oversight and transparency of the dynamics of the online sphere and elections. And of course, I want to mention also the role of political parties that are the main agents of all of this. They need to be a bit more aware and active into being part of a more ethical and transparent behavior as main sources, actually, of the dynamics that we see. Campaigns are run overwhelmingly online by now in all countries. So there is an urgent, I would say, need for better understanding of their role and the consequences and more proactive engagement into being part of the solution. And then, of course, this is the Brussels perspective, but we increasingly see that a lot of the regulation and the competences, even sometimes direct tasks, but also opportunities for electoral authorities or civil society and all the actors around elections come from Brussels directly, not least from the European Democracy Shield, which just came out a few days ago, 10 days ago, and which includes for the first time the enlargement countries very actively as part of this broader European effort to tackle some of these challenges with the right approach and upholding fundamental rights. In this sense, we hope to see more engagement in Brussels from electoral authorities, from, there's many instruments of peer learning, of the work of organizations such as yourselves. There's an urgent need to develop legislation to approximate, but meanwhile, as also the Shield has emphasized, soft tools can also come to hand. And here I want to maybe try to draw toward the nearing of the conclusion of my intervention by highlighting some work that we've done in Albania in the last ahead of the last general elections, together with the CC, NDI, the Rule of Law Center of Finland, and not least BIRN, Albania, which was the promotion and introduction of a code of conduct on digital campaigning, a concrete example of a soft tool in the lack of proper hard legislation, but which can provide a framework for watchdogs, for actors against which to measure the commitments that political parties took, but also can provide also the backbone of future legislation, and is therefore an instrument also encouraged by the European Democracy Shield and the EU in general, having itself such a code of conduct at the European level. I will highlight very quickly a couple of elements of the monitoring that then BIRN, Albania, actually you yourself, Kristina, with your team did. Very short monitoring of the code of conduct. Of course, as I mentioned, millions of interactions, over 7.5 million interactions during the campaign related to the campaign on Facebook, over 8 million, on Instagram, some 265,000 over of dollars spent from what could be traced, but many infractions, of course, 349 infractions of the code, most of them relating to lack of transparency of political advertising, unethical use of technology, AI labeled, AI generated content, not appropriately labeled, and not least 58 third-party pages, which present very severe issues of challenges of especially political finance transparency, so therefore tracking the intents of those behind. Kristina can share the wealth of findings that you have, but I just wanted to mention these findings from the last elections in Albania, just to highlight the need and the urgency of aligning with the EU digital acquis in this field. And of course, the European Democracy Shield that is just out there will present the right opportunity for this. Thank you. Over.
Thank you so much, Blerta. And of course, I would be available for anybody that has more question about this latest monitoring in Albania, about how political actors themselves acted upon this code of conduct that they signed prior to election. But as we heard, there were a lot of infringements and other violations, again identified even in the last election. Blerta mentioned that one of the most important aspects is also the focus on cybersecurity of the electoral processes. And we have seen that the work of CCs around the Western Balkans have, let's say, year by year, introducing more and more digital platforms or online instruments, being those used for the education of the voters, of course, for the transparency of the data during the electoral processes, but many of those, like in the case of Albania, for the documentation of cases of violations, possible denunciation of violation during the electoral processes, as well as the online system for the financial reports of political parties and candidates. And with so many different instruments, of course, the challenges were, let's say, registered repeatedly, election over election. And in the last year election, I know that what was the main news, at least looking at the broadcasters from Tirana about the election in Kosovo, it was exactly that, look, even in Kosovo, the page went down. And perhaps they are also manipulating election. And that is based on our experience when such challenges or difficulties or attacks in the infrastructure of the CCs have caused also a lot of disinformation around election, and which of course tackle the trust of people and voters into the whole process. In Kosovo, we'll have elections soon. So I'll ask Kastriot to perhaps summarize some of the main challenges that CC has encountered here, but also other actors, if possible, and what are the main lessons learned for the future? I don't know if you are in time for the upcoming election, but let's try.
Thank you very much, Kristina. Yeah, it's very true. In the Balkans, especially in the places that I monitor, especially in Kosovo and Albania, we have a lot of cyber attacks in the main critical infrastructure, including elections systems. And most of you might think that this is like a common thing. It happened even in the US and in developed countries. But if you analyze deeply, and when I say analyze in a technical way, The most of the time this kind of accident and this kind of attacks has happened because of the people who are responsible of doing things right. They haven't done his job right. So if you go to Albania, you can see the big hack that happened from Iranian state government actors. It was because of one of the Exchange, Microsoft Exchange email server was not up to date. They forgot to got the updates for that server, and after that, from that, they penetrate in an internal network and hack internal systems. If you're going back to election that we have in Kosovo back in February, we had something that for most of the time the system was down, and there are a lot of thoughts it was like a system was broken or there was a denial of service attack. And until now, we don't have any confirmation from a government or from a central election commission saying that it was an attack or not. I have done my analysis about the system using a technique that is called passive reconnaissance. This means I was not authorized to do that analysis, but since I was doing only by viewing it, not touching, not penetrating it. This is a technique widely used from cybersecurity experts and have nothing involved in about penetrating or violating any rules against the system. Our system for counting the votes was pretty broke. They had, during the election day, they had 1.38 billion requests, but most of the requests was recurring requests the system was doing to itself. From this 1.38 billions, only 2.72 million requests. It means one of the 700 of requests was a legit request that should go to the system. So if you count in a request for a second, that is the way that you count the load in the system, it was about 40 to 50 requests per second. So that for most of the medias that have your own portals, like having 50 requests per second is nothing. But having a request that will make 70, 100, or 200 requests to your own system itself, not from going from the offside, of course it's going to bring down your service. So what happened in election day, they brought themselves down. No one brought them down. But maybe to make things smoother and inform or the mass and saying that we are in a bad spot because we are having attacks. But from my perspective, from my analysis, it was no denial service attack. It was self-denial service attack. They attacked themselves. Outside of that, we have other issues. They have done trainings. That was very funny, the way that they conduct the training. I'm not making it up. It's a report by the company who report how they make the training. They collect 600 people in a basketball hall and present like this in projector and say, this is a system, you click here, you put votes here, you click submit, and this is the way they report your votes from voting center in one of the schools to the main central system. But what happened, in election day, one of the guys from one of the cities, it meant to put 470 votes and it put 47,000 votes for one party in the system. And of course, that center for voting had to limit that all potential voters was 5,000. And it tells a lot. I haven't validated from technical perspective the issue. I haven't seen the code of the system for sure, but it tells a lot. If a guy can put 47,000 in a field that you should allow at most 5,000, it means the system has no validation on it. And of course, that's another issue, because in this kind of critical systems, outside of validation, you need to implement multi-layer authentication. For example, Kristina is my lead. I have to put the votes. The vote's going to go to Kristina. Kristina got double check it and approve or reject. And after that, the system gonna go in a mass public that other people can see. There are a lot of issues. I'm gonna mention only one other because it's pretty fun. They have the same server for showing the result to public, and they use the same server for commissioners putting votes in system. What happened? There are a lot of flow of requests trying to see the results, and that overload the system, and for the same reason, the system went down, but other people who are part of the counting vote couldn't put new votes in the system because the system was down, because it was the same server. And maybe you're asking me, how do you know that? That's very, very funny. The way I noticed it, one of the medias was making a live stream in the center when the was being counted one by one, and put the camera and monitor that I saw the URL. I said, okay, just grab this URL and try to see in my PC if it opened. And yeah, it opened in my PC. And this kind of system that are critical system that are only meant for people who are responsible for counting votes should not be in public. No one from your house or any public places can access them. They should be used only in a isolated environments, using isolated network, maybe a VPN, private VPNs only for governments, and so on. And it doesn't happen. And the problem is we have a second. Now in November we had like a local elections, and they grab all the issues they have and they fix only one. That one that have to do with the public, that system is not overloading itself, but all other issues are still alive. And of course, if we are talking about all the same challenge for new election, we're gonna face all the same challenge for upcoming election for sure. It depends if someone decide to weaponize this and attack, or let's hope that no one gonna attack. One of the ways, I don't know if you have any guys from compliance here, one of the ways to manage risk is just to accept and pray to God nothing gonna happen. So probably government is using this way.
Thank you, Kastriot. I forgot to tell to the panelists not to make joke about AI or technology-related aspects that I'm totally ignorant upon. So, but thank you for all that. And just to make a correlation with my country, for example, in the last election, we had faced more and more challenges also because of the added aspects of the diaspora voting, and that was, we had a combination not only of different layers of, let's say, services that were provided online, but also combined with a very low digital literacy of people that needed to use the system in order to get registered and to access, and later on, of course, to ensure that they will be identified as voters. But we can spend hours and hours talking on different aspects related to technology and election and how secure they are. But I will jump to another aspect in relation to election and to Rezarta, because I know that you have been monitoring in the past election in Kosovo, both online media and social media use during the campaigns. And if you can share some of the main findings and possibly focus on the main violations or concerns and lesson learned for the next steps, and of course for the other countries.
Faleminderit shumë Kristin, është gjithmonë kënaqësi të jesh në panelet të BIRN-it për shkak të kompozimit të panelistëve, gjithashtu edhe pjesëmarrësve, të cilët janë të fushës dhe besoj që kuptojnë shumë më lehtë të gjeturat që i kemi. Në fakt do të fokusohem më shumë tek monitorimi i rrjeteve sociale dhe më pak te mediat online, me që e kemi këtu në Norikun dhe mbulon edhe më mirë me që ne bashkëpunojmë në këtë drejtim për të analizuar gjuhën e cila përdoret gjatë fushatës zgjedhore. E përmendi edhe kolegu pak më herët, në fakt në Kosovë jemi një vit zgjedhor, nuk është që nuk e kemi shumë zakon, e kemi zakon të mbajmë mjaft shumë zgjedhje. Këtë po e tregojmë që nga viti 2021, kur ishim dhe në mes të pandemisë, kemi mbajtur zgjedhje në nivelin lokal, do thotë me maska, me dorza, me dezinfektues, dhe pastaj kemi pjesën e shqetësimeve të paraqitjes së rezultateve online, që për neve qytetar mjafton me bëri refresh faqen dhe me pa rezultatet, pa e ditë këtë pjesën brapa të Cybersecurity për më siguru se votat tona po numërohen dhe çfarë po ndodh me rezultate. debatin. Do thotë prej vitit 2021 kemi kryesisht një zhvendosje në rrjetet sociale të organizimit të fushatës zgjedhore, derisa ne kishim sfida dhe nga aspekti gjinor të organizimit të fushatës zgjedhore në terren, pjesëmarrjes të grave në diskutime mjaft të ndryshme për të asaj urbane më shumë edhe në rurale. Kishim sfida në këtë drejtim dhe menduam që nëse do zhvendosej kjo në pjesën digjitale, do të jetë më lehtë ndërtimi i kontentit dhe për ta shpërndar, për të pasur pak më të lehtë targetimin e votuesve. Mirë po na doli një sfidë tjetër, e cila ishte gjuha e urrejtjes mes kandidatëve më e shprehur në rrjete online, duke marrë parasysh edhe shpërndarjen e dezinformimit dhe të gjitha mënyra tjera të keqpërdërimit të informatave në këtë drejtim, duke shtuar edhe zhvillimet e fundit edhe deepfake-in, i cili po ndikon mjaft shumë tek qytetarët për të mobilizuar dhe gjithashtu edhe për të ndikuar tek ata në gjithë procesin e votimit. Ne si DFRD, tashmë në 3 palë gjetje, 2 nacionale dhe 1 lokale, jemi duke u munduar pak shumë të edukojmë subjektet politike se si të sillen në rrjetet sociale, me që në momentin që një subjekt politik regjistrohet pranë Komisionit Qendror Zgjedhor për të marrë pjesë në një raund të zgjedhjeve, qoftë nacionale apo qoftë lokale, e merr një dokument nga KQZ-ja që shkruhet për kodin e mirësjelljes gjatë fushatës. Mirë, po ky kod është mjaft i vjetër dhe nuk e përfshin pjesën online. E përfshin mirësjelljen në fushat në tubime apo diskutime të ndryshme me qytetar, mirë, po nuk e përfshin se si do të duhet të silleshin në online. Ne kemi hartuar së pari një dokument A4, i thjesht me 10 pika të thjeshta se çfarë duhet të kemi parasysh kur bëjnë postime online, se si mos të nxisin qytetarët të përdorin gjuhë të papërshtatshme dhe si të mos atakojnë kundër kandidatët e tyre me gjuhë të urrejtjes. Mirë po në zgjedhjet e fundit nacionale vendosëm që dokumentin ta hapim me të gjithë subjektet politike që ishin të regjistruara pranë KQZ-s për zgjedhje lokale. Dhe nëse besoni ose jo, ky dokument A4 në një gjuhë u zhvillua nga një faqe në 4 faqe. Do të thotë secili subjekt politik e kishte marrë personale për të adresuar secilin çështje që ka qenë negative gjatë fushatës, se si do duhet të silleshin mirë, dhe ne u munduam e ripërpunuam gjithë materialin dhe e bëm të nënshkrueshëm nga të gjitha palët. Kur po them palët, këtu janë subjektet politike të cilat garojnë për zgjedhje, jemi ne shoqëria civile të cilët e monitorojnë fushatën zgjedhore dhe një aktor i pamohueshëm janë mediat, të cilat gjithashtu ndajnë artikuj, për në të njëjtën kohë bëjnë edhe monitorimin e fushatës zgjedhore. Dhe nga monitorimi i fundit i fushatës zgjedhore kemi parë që megjithse nënshkruan, megjithatë ata na dhanë shumë komente se çfarë do duhet të bëjmë më mirë në këtë kohë të mirësjelljes, megjithatë e shkelën vetë subjektet politike, të cilat kishin për detyrë ta ndanin materialin edhe me kandidatët e tyre në nivel lokal, ishin shkelësit kryesor të këtyre materialeve. Mirë po, një aspekt tjetër i cila ka zgjuar mjaft shumë negativitet të rrjetet sociale janë edhe analistët, për mos t'ju thonë shumë analistë ose krijuesit e mendimeve në debate publike, me që në prime time gjatë zgjedhjeve në Kosovë, në 7 apo 8 kanale në të njëjtën kohë zhvillohen debate të ndryshme me nga 7 deri në 8 panelistë ndryshëm, të cilët e kanë një diskurs mjaft negativ të cilën e përdorin për fushat zgjedhore, që megjithatë pastaj i nxitet qytetarët të bëjnë komentime në këtë drejtim. Nëse do t'ja shtoja vetëm pak edhe pjesën e barazisë gjinore, me që sot e kemi fillimin e 16 ditëve të aktivizmit për dhunën ndaj grave në bazë gjinore, gjithashtu në pjesën online, në dhunën online që po bëhet, gjatë monitorimit e vërejmë që kjo shkallë tek gratë ka një përqindje mjaft të lartë. Nëse marrim monitorimin në zgjedhje nacionale, ku rastet e shkeljes ose bërjes shkeljeve në gjuhë të urrejtjes apo dezinformim ndaj të tjerëve është e lartë, llogaritni që 7 deri në 9% është gjuha e urrejtjes ndaj grave që zhvillohet në nivel nacional, ku do të thotë gratë ende kanë interes të miren më politik, me që do të është prezentimi i tyre pastaj edhe në parlament, është puna në komisione parlamentare, është krejt një aktivizëm tjetër, ndërsa marrim në zgjedhje lokale, kemi pasur sfida të formojmë lista zgjedhore me gratë me kvotën gjinore së paku 30% në këto komuna dhe lërëm ta bëjmë mbi 35%, që është një vullnet i subjekteve politike, të cilat zakonisht ndalohen aty dhe nuk shkojnë përtej. Kjo gjuhë e përdorur në rrjetet sociale, fal digitalizmit që ne mendonim që do të ndikonte edhe më mirë dhe më lehtë për gratë që të bënin fushatën, na del një problematik tjetër sepse gratë po atakohen më shumë. Kjo neve na qet një sfidë krejt tjetër ku po bëhet edhe më e padrejtë fushata në hapësira digjitale, po bëhet edhe më e pabarabartë se që ka qenë pjesën e hapësirës digjitale dhe po shohim se do të ndikojë në vitet e ardhshme që të kemi më pak gra që do të kenë interes që të miren me jetën publike. Nëse 2 ose 3 persona e shohim që po atakohen vazhdimisht, që janë të zëshme, mendoni se një grua në një komunë shumë të vogël sa ka interes të angazhohet në politikë, nëse do të pret një atakim të tillë nga qytetarët në rrjetet sociale. Nga zgjedhjet e fundit lokale, të cilat i kishim me që si vjet i patëm zgjedhjet nacionale, patëm zgjedhjet lokale, e patëm raundin e dytë të zgjedhjeve lokale, dhe tani po përgatitemi përsëri për zgjedhje nacionale. Mund të paramendoni këtë polarizim politik që po zhvillohet në rrjetet tona sociale mbes subjektive politike. Mirë po, çfarë shohim ndryshe nga monitorimi nacionale në lokale, e shohim që tek zgjedhjet lokale shkeljet po bëhen kryesisht nga kandidatët për asamble, do të ka më shumë inate personale mes kandidatëve të subjektive politike, të cilin e shprehin pastaj në rrjetet e tyre sociale. Në Kosovë, edhe pse kemi mjaft përdorues të TikTokut, të platformës X apo Instagramit, një pjesë e mirë e qytetarëve informatat i marrin dhe i shpërndajnë përmes rrjetit Facebook, me që ende e shohin si një gazetë që hyn dhe lexojnë informata kohë pas kohe, ende e shohin si një vend ku mund të marrin një informat me një titull, me një postim, me një tekst dhe me një fotografi, krahas me rrjetet tjera sociale. Dhe gjithashtu kemi një përdorim të lartë të TikTokut, kryesisht me first time voters, me ata të rinj të cilët votojnë për herë të parë, janë gjenerata mbi 18 vjeç dhe atë ditë që mbushin 18 vjeç, dhe shohim që mjafton me 3 sekonda për të lexuar një titull dhe për të parë një fotografi dhe për të vendosur të ardhmen një deputeti për 4 vite, qoftë në nivelin lokal dhe qoftë në nivelin nacional. Andaj shohim një diskrepancë shumë të madhe mes moshave dhe platformave që këta po i përdoren. Mirë po, kam pasur kujdes kësaj radhe liderët e subjektive politike dhe faqet zyrtare të subjektive politike për të postuar informata të cilat mund të çojnë qytetarët të shprehin gjuhë të urrejtjes, mirë po kanë lërë hapësira shumë të vogla që pastaj qytetarët shprehin shumë talent për të postuar komente negative në këtë drejtim. Gjithashtu duke atakuar kryesisht gratë në këtë drejtim, që ka qenë shumë sfiduese, me që në këto zgjedhje lokale kemi pasur vetëm 20 gra kandidate për kryetare komune, fatkeqësisht nga të cilat 19 nuk kanë arritur as të shkojnë në raundin e dytë pra të balotazhet për këto zgjedhje, ndërsa kemi vetëm një kryetare të zgjedhur nga komuniteti serb në këtë drejtim. Dhe kjo tregon mjaft mirë për shfaqje se çfarë po ndodh edhe me diskutimet në televizionet tona, mirë po për shpërfaqje dhe shqetësimin ton në hapësirën digjitale se çfarë po ndodh me gjuhën e urrejtjes.
Shumë faleminderit Rezarta. Thank you so much for the presentation, and perhaps this immediately lead to Norik. You are founder of Pikasa, an application, am I calling it right? An application that is used by many civil society organizations and researchers looking into the media monitoring, but also political communication, and especially the communication around election throughout the Balkans. And I know that Pikasa has been engaged in different countries in the last year and through different rounds of election. So what are your main lessons learned on the main characteristic of the electoral campaigns being run in the last years around the Western Balkans in the digital sphere? How the behavior of both political actors but also of media and of voters changed during the electoral period in different platforms?
First of all, thank you for having me here. It's such an honor to be in the same panel with organizations that we work a lot together, such as BIRN, such as D4D. We are doing this monitoring of election, not just election, I mean the entire media conversation in more than 30 countries, but today I want to focus only on those 5-6 around the region, which have some similarities in behavior around election, because this would be our topic. So I would start by, I was inspired by a lot of what was said before, and first thing that was coming to my mind was that in general, political content is very boring for audiences in media, because you have media outlets who publish on average, let's say in Kosovo, Albania is the same. Most of media outlets publish around 60, 70 on average news articles every day. This content, 60, 70 on average, 50 to 60% of all this content is political. But on the other hand, when you see all the political content that comes to the monitoring, the least engaging content is the political content. So you have entertainment, sport, business, opinions, I don't know, cars, sports, culture, everything. So political content usually goes to the lowest engagement rates. And this concludes that political content in general is very boring, but this is what politicians are selling. How I see is the political side trying to make their content more entertaining, engaging, and interesting. So this is why we often see a lot of hate speech, a lot of debates, a lot of sparks between them in order to make this content more interesting. Only in the past 2 years, this one and the last one, in these 5 countries in the region, we have witnessed 22 election cycles. So having here parliamentary, local election, or revoting or by elections. So all in all, 22. And across them, you have some symptoms that signal you that there are elections coming, even without you knowing that there are elections coming. So those symptoms would be increased volume of political content. Just in North Macedonia and in Kosovo, this is around 35% more content when elections are coming. So in that month, 35 to 40% more political content. Around double more social media content, for which also Rezarta mentioned a little bit. So you have double more social media political content, and then you have around 70 to 80% increased engagement of audiences. So these are the signals, the flowers of the election. Also some timing of posting shift, because normally media outlets work between 8 and 4 p.m. Normally 70% of the content is published in this time, but when elections are coming, you see more new political content at the night hours. And that goes together with the fact that people are more engaging at night with the phones online, and then when you offer them some more political content, they can feed more. A lot was said about the hate speech, about different aspects of the regulations, but what is very interesting for us, for instance, TikTok in Albania was banned officially during the last election process. It was officially banned, and we were curious to see how this banning of TikTok what will mean for Albania. And it meant in the end that it resulted with more engagement on TikTok compared to before it was banned. So this banning of TikTok was actually very not realistic, first of all, technically not implementable. So it resulted with people using more TikTok than they used before the banning. And what was even more interesting is that the ruling party who banned the TikTok, they paused like for 1 week using TikTok, but after a week, all candidates continued using TikTok just as nothing really happened. So this goes with what our colleague from Brussels said with the regulations. So a lot of regulations, a lot of changing of this law and that law and this law and that law, but in the end, ruling parties never even respect their own regulations. Also, around maybe you just signal when I go, because I can speak on and on, but a little bit about maybe how the foreign influence goes with all this mess of news articles every day. We have published some interesting findings about the foreign influence in and during the election. It is very interesting. Only in 2025, we used to monitor the battle of big forces in the Balkans, like USA, Europe, Russia, China. You know, all the conversation in media that happens around these major forces. 2025 is a very interesting year. Since the shift in international conversation of the US foreign policy came to place, there is an increased drop of EU presence in media. So whatever you see a big conversation about international influence, you see US versus China, US versus Russia, Russia versus China, and so on and so on. But you don't see Europe in this conversation. So it's already not existing realistically. You find some articles yet, but I think they lost completely track of being present in the media conversation about important events internationally, whether it is economic clash, whether it is AI, technology, international politics, and so on. So this is very interesting, new to us as well. We haven't witnessed that in the past 15 years of monitoring election, that there is such a sudden drop of completely not being present of EU. We are used to having more of EU in media outlets, and suddenly that's not the case.
I'm not sure if they have intentionally decreased the level of communication, or are there other actors that are being more and more sophisticated into using propaganda and inducing fears through different kind of disinformation or narratives, especially conservative ones. So this is a long debate, but of course lesson learned for all the actors, and especially even civil rights defenders in general that want to have a more active voice. Also for being thus against hate speech toward women candidates or toward minorities, but also the misuse of, let's say, artificial intelligence, like it was very clear in the last elections in Albania, but also in other countries, and unfortunately misused also by the leaders of the political parties there. As you said, we can talk for hours for each of these issues, but nevertheless, one of the main players always are the public institutions, being those government, being independent institutions like the Central Electoral Commission. So as we are facing all these challenges, what is the role of the governments or of CCs in order to, let's say, secure as possible fair and free election even in the digital sphere? What are the challenges in Bosnia, but also what experiences you can share for the rest of the Balkans?
Thank you. Good afternoon to all, and thank you for being with us today. I will go briefly through this, what previous speakers mentioned, and kind of apply to situation in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Our Central Election Committee is the main state institution that organizes elections. And just recently funding was approved for introduction of scanning and electronic following of the elections, which will be, I hope, applicable next elections, next October. What Kastriot mentioned about security of whole that system, that was one of the main arguments of the opponents of introduction of the new technologies, that it is prone to interference, and that it will bring more unstable rather than stable system than before. I certainly hope that if nothing else, the results of elections will be not waited for a month and a half for some of the elections that we had experienced previously.
Sorry, if I may, it's electronic voting or even the identification.
It will be identification of the voters and scanning of the. There will be physical paper trace that will be scanned in order to whole process of counting make more fast. Yes. Yeah. When it comes to media and social networks, we just recently, this Sunday, had elections, step elections, small elections, actually for president of one of the entities, two major candidates, four side insignificant candidates. But honestly, in a month of this pre-election campaign, I never received any message other than people sharing titles and links from other portals, but nothing specific from any of those 6 candidates through Facebook, LinkedIn, I don't know, Telegram, WhatsApp channel. So even in that segment, we are lagging behind. Curious thing is that actually one of the leaders of, actually the leader of a political party whose candidate apparently is winning, announced that for the next year, general elections, which are scheduled to be in October, they plan a serious online campaign, serious engagement in social networks, and I think that will be something to monitor and to follow how it will be actually done. When it comes to the security of the whole system, in the previous 2 rounds of elections, general and local elections, we had assistance through NATO forces that we have based in Sarajevo. A special unit from Great Britain was sent in a pre-election period until the elections were over to monitor possible foreign interference. And I'm really sorry that there were no results published. What kind of findings and what kind of eventually actions they undertook. But the most important thing is that there were no spectacular reports about foreign interference, which is quite, in our case, understandable, as there are 2 aspects. Foreigners in Bosnia and Herzegovina either go directly in media straight without hiding, or they have their proxies who would do that for them, local, so there is no need, consequently, for the foreign interference. How it is going to be for the next elections, which are scheduled for the next year, we will see. But generally, I think what is the most important thing is security of overall electoral process when it comes to the online world. It has nothing to do directly with elections, but when it comes to, there are two illustrated stories about cybersecurity in Bosnia and Herzegovina from 2 years approximately ago. In one of the local, honest to God, you can't not say the truth when you hear this. In one of the local municipalities, there was activity in improving cybersecurity, and the mayor of that municipality said, "Oh, we have no problem with that. We have nothing digitalized." And the second thing is, from the national parliament, there was a serious cyber attack, and the main activity to prevent further attacks was to put inscription on the computers, do not switch on. So unfortunately, those are the real stories about cybersecurity. So I just hope that we got some improvements in the last 2 years.
I know that Kosovo tested last year the electronic identification and possible voting in Albania. The electronic identification was spread across the country, but the electronic voting, which can ensure the immediate, let's say, results as soon as the polling stations are closed, is only being tested in.
I think in our case it is not going to be possible electronic voting, only scanning and electronic identification of the voters, which is great improvement because just speaking about this Sunday's elections, there is already official report to the police. Police is investigating that about 2 or 3 persons who were in France during the elections, but when some family members came to the polling station, they saw that they were signed as they were voted already. So, if nothing else, I think that is a possibility to be prevented.
No, that is a very, very good step forward, and I wanted only to mention that in the last by-election that we had in the beginning of November in Albania, for first time we tested also the EI counting of the votes through the electronic scanning, and we have to recognize that CC is one of the institutions that is being more, let's say, open-minded in testing different technologies, and also quite open in identifying and reporting the challenges encountered during the use or testing of such technologies and possible lesson learned for the next election. So I believe that there will be too many processes that will change the way we vote in the upcoming years, and we all have to be much more careful on how these systems are built and how secure they are, and of course about the online communication and campaigning in all aspects so that we ensure inclusiveness and as many or educated voters as possible. So I know that we have spent the whole time, so I don't know if there is any pressing issue or if Blerta, that we have again, has something very, very short to add to the panel.
I mean, Kristina, I'll just conclude perhaps by, now that all the colleagues have spoken, by reiterating again that for us it's important that in whatever the countries try to do in tackling these challenges, that they align with the EU principles, standards, mechanisms, tools, because the EU is a global standard setter, especially for this region, and is the only guarantor, you know, that issues can be tackled, but also at the same time, everything that needs to be safeguarded can be safeguarded in terms of fundamental freedoms, and you know, so that would be my main point. Thank you again for this opportunity.
Thank you, Blerta, and thank you to all the panelists. And I hope we can continue with any question or discussion over a cup of coffee there. So I'll ask an applause for our panelists. And thank you so much for staying with us until the very end of the day. Thank you.